Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 5, Text 20. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sa Esha Bhagavalingais. Tribhir etar adhoksha jaha. Svalakshita gatir brahman. Sarvesham mama cheshvaraha. Sa esha bhagaval lingais. Tribhir etar adhoksha jaha. Svalakshita gatir brahman. Sarvesham mamakcheshvaraha. Sa he, Esha, this, Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead, Lingai, by the symptoms, Tribhi, by the three, Etai, by all these, Adhoksa Jaha, the superseer transcendence. Su alakshita, veritably unseen. Gati, movement. Brahman, O Narada. Sarvesham, of everyone. Mama, mine. Cha, as also. Ishvaraha, the controller. Translation by Srila Prabhupada and purport by Srila Prabhupada. O Brahmana Narad, the superseer, the transcendent Lord, is beyond the perception of the material senses of the living entities, because of the above mentioned three modes of nature. But he is the controller of everyone, including me. Please repeat. O Brahmana Narad, the superseer, the transcendent Lord, is beyond the perception of the material senses of the living entities, because of the above mentioned three modes of nature. But he is the controller of everyone, including me. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verse 24 and 25, the Lord has declared very clearly that the impersonalist who gives more importance to the transcendental rays of the Lord as Brahma Jyoti, and who concludes that the absolute truth is ultimately impersonal and only manifests a form at a time of necessity, is less intelligent than the personalist, however much the impersonalist may be engaged in studying the Vedanta. The fact is that such impersonalists are covered by the above mentioned three modes of material nature. Therefore, they are unable to approach the transcendental personality of the Lord. The Lord is not approachable by everyone because he is curtained by the Yogamaya potency. But one should not wrongly conclude that the Lord was formerly unmanifested and has now manifested himself in the human form. This conception of the formlessness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is due to the Yogamaya curtain of the Lord, and can be removed only by the Supreme Will, as soon as the conditioned soul surrenders unto him. The devotees of the Lord, who are transcendental to the above mentioned three modes of material nature, can see the all-blissful transcendental form of the Lord with their vision of love in the attitude of pure devotional service. Oma Gyana Timirandasya Gyanangana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So Lord Brahma, who's Narad's dad, is now continuing on answering his very illustrious son's questions. So Narad Muni didn't ask sort of small questions. He asked, give me knowledge of the soul, let me understand the super soul, let me understand the symptoms of this world, how the creation took place, who you work under, what's your situation. So he had just a few little questions for his father. And Lord Brahma, as the creator of the world, each millennia, each time the planets are destroyed, he again has to create. So at the beginning of his day, he's again creating, and it's all going on. So he's answering his illustrious son. So first of all, Srila Prabhupada is talking in this purport about how the impersonalists are less intelligent than the personalists. So I don't think that the impersonalists would actually agree with that, because they can take their whole lifetime studying various Vedic literatures, and they are very well versed in the Vedas. So I'm sure if you ask them, they would accept their knowledge as much superior to the sentimental personalists. However, this is not the fact. So the reason is that because they are thinking in this way, that the Lord's form is, if he manifests the form, it's just a temporary form. But actually, he's just, the Lord means the rays of Brahman, and they want to enter the rays of Brahman, and some want to enter the Lord himself. So it's actually a a block, because if they're feeling like that, then how is Krishna going to manifest himself to them? Because everything in the material world is according to desire. So if we are very serious and desiring Krishna to come before us, then we have a chance of that happening. But if we don't even want that, which the impersonalists do not, then how are they possibly going to have the Lord manifest to them? So therefore, despite all their knowledge and their austerities, because some of them are live a life of austerity, they don't get that nectar of a personal loving relationship with God, because it's not what they're after. So therefore it's described that the personalists are more intelligent than the impersonalists. So in the verse, Lord Brahmaji is explaining that the transcendent Lord is beyond the perception of the material senses of the living entities, because we're covered by the three modes of material nature. So those three modes of material nature have been surrounding us and immersing us. The soul, the pure soul, has been immersed and surrounded by these material modes since time immemorial. And one can't even actually get one's head around time immemorial. You can think of a few thousand years, a few 100,000 stretching it, but time immemorial, life after life, it's really difficult for the jiva to come near that. But that's how long we've been conditioned by the material modes. Of course, those modes change according to the body that we're inhabiting. If we're inhabiting a dog's body, we're going to have different modes to if we're inhabiting a cow's body, etc. And when we get to human life, we really have the chance then to either progress upwards in our spiritual life or sink down to a lower species. Prabhupada many times advised us not to waste this human life, because it's the greatest gift. Because in this life we have the chance to raise ourselves and again connect with Krishna. So because God is absolute, we are made of the same substance as the Lord. The Lord is made of Sat Chit Ananda, which is knowledge and eternity and bliss. Eternity, knowledge and bliss. So that's our actual essence. And once we start to connect with the Lord's essence, then that blooms within the living entity. So, but always the Lord remains the supreme absolute truth, and we remain very tiny. But we have an eternal, blissful, loving relationship with the Lord, and that is actually the goal of life, to reignite that love for Krishna. So it's described that Krishna wants us to love him. He wants us more than we want him. He's wanting us. So the reason he wants living entities to love him is because that's his happiness is in rasa, or having relationships. And even in the material world, the happiness that people gain is from relationships. So people may say they get happiness from this and that, but actually the most satisfying happiness is the happiness from having a loving relationship. So the Lord is always wishing to relish that blissful and loving relationship with each and every one of us. But unfortunately, we're the ones that are kind of, because we're covered by the modes, we're sort of hesitant to surmount those modes. So it's explained here that the impersonalists are covered by Yogamaya's potency. So why does Yogamaya hide the Lord? She has many tasks. She's the one who's organizing all Krishna's leelas in the spiritual world. whatever is to be done each day, Yogamaya is making arrangements. But she also hides Krishna's identity from the living entities. And the reason is, until we actually can become free from those material modes and can use our senses in the service of Krishna, these senses that it's described here that the living entity is beyond the perception of the material senses. The Lord, is beyond the perception of the material senses of the living entities because of the modes of nature. So our senses are unable to connect with Krishna, with the Lord, with the spiritual world, because we are surrounded and kind of contaminated by those modes, but that's due to our desire. So Yogamaya has that potency to keep the Lord covered, and so we remain immersed in the material senses. So, like for instance, we can't even see our own eyelid. What's to be seen? We can't even hear a dog whistle. Our senses are so imperfect. So many times we misunderstand things through our material senses. And actually, I wanted to read a couple of little verses. First of all, why are our senses so limited and unable? Why is it so difficult to turn inwards and become a sage? And so this is a verse from the Kathopanishad 2.1.1, and it's that here Lord Brahma is the culprit. Svayambhu Lord Brahma has designed the senses of the jiva in such a way that they are naturally driven outwards onto matter, and hence the consciousness of the jiva is projected externally. This extrovert inclination prevents the jiva from seeing the Paramatma manifestation of the Supreme Lord within himself. Only a meagre handful of dhiras, introspective sages, have an intense desire to obtain immortal nectar in the form of pure bhakti to Shri Shri Radha Krishna. These dhiras withdraw their senses from the external sense objects, and by projecting these senses inwards, see the Supreme Personality of Godhead who resides within. So we could blame Lord Brahma, or we could blame ourselves for not being one of those ones who intensely desires to go inwards. So that's the nature of the living entity who's contaminated by those modes, that the senses are going to go outwards. Like even with the eyes, like say you're chanting, trying to chant your japa. If you're looking out, it's so easy for the senses then to follow the eyes, and then the mind's gone. So that's a natural tendency that we're kind of like, in a sense, battling against when we take up spiritual life, because we're trying to use all our senses for Krishna, but material energies, they've got that pull. So I wanted to read a little bit about the Lord having been nirguna and us being saguna, because we're surrounded, we are covered by the three modes of material nature, whereas the Lord, of course, is eternally free. So this is chapter 13, so? Yes, text 15. The Supersoul is the original source of all senses. So the senses, the source of the senses is the Lord. Yet he is without senses. He is unattached, although he is the maintainer of all living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time he's the master of the modes of material nature. So I just wanted to read a little bit of the purport. It's interesting. The Supreme Lord, although the source of all the senses of the living entities, doesn't have material senses like they have. Actually, the individual souls have spiritual senses. So we actually have spiritual senses. But in conditioned life, they are covered with the material elements, and therefore the sense activities are exhibited through matter. The Supreme Lord's senses are not so covered. His senses are transcendental, and therefore he's called Nirguna. So this is his quality. His senses are completely pure, but our senses, although initially spiritually pure, are covered, and therefore we're using them for external purposes. And then the next verse explains the supreme The supreme truth exists both internally and externally in the moving and non-moving. He is beyond the power of the material senses to see or to know. Although he is far, far away, he is also near to all. So we can't see or understand the Supreme Lord with his material senses. So it's therefore, in the Vedic language, it is said that to understand him, our material mind and senses cannot act. But one who has purified his mind and senses by practicing Krishna consciousness can see him constantly. So it's all a question of moving our consciousness inwards and towards the Supreme Lord. Because everything is possible. These senses, the senses that we're using, are connected with the body, connected with the mind, and therefore, in general, we're not using our senses for Krishna. But the possibility is there. This is why Srila Prabhupada has given us this wonderful process, so that we can use our senses for Krishna. We are able to see the Lord, we're able to hear the Lord's name, we're able to eat Krishna Prasad, smell the flowers, and touch the transcendental body of the Lord. There's so much we're able to do when we're performing our devotional service. It uses our senses in his service, and in that way they get purified. It's like our aim as we move through spiritual life is to purify these senses, that we're stuck with them. They want to go externally, but we can use those senses in Krishna's service, and that way the mind gets purified and the senses get purified. That's the wonderful thing about Bhakti Yoga. It's so practical. It's not like we have to sit for thousands of years and do all sorts of austerities. Our austerities are pretty minimal, really. And, it's a question of the mind remembering to move the senses towards Krishna and not back towards the body and the mind. So I'd just also like to read from the 11th chapter, where it explains how we can see Krishna. How can we see Krishna? Well, here it's explained. Bhaktya tvananya shakya aham evam vidorjuna jatum drashtum cha tatvena praveshtum cha parantapa. My dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am, standing before you, and thus can be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding. So, many times Srila Prabhupada used to be asked, well, how do we see Krishna everywhere? And Prabhupada used to say that we see Krishna through his energies. Like every single, even all around us, inside us, there's trillions of living entities. So everything we see has come from Krishna, and it does not exist without Krishna. So by seeing things and remembering that connection with Krishna, that's the way to see Krishna. However, Srila Prabhupada also explained that the pure devotee is actually seeing the form of Krishna everywhere. Now that's pretty mind-blowing. That's why, when you would even just see Srila Prabhupada, there was such a golden effulgence and such a difference. You just instantly got this kind of knowledge that this person is not of this material world, and that's because he was always seeing Krishna. So, and Srila Prabhupada explains that when we chant purely, actually Krishna comes and he dances on our tongue. Now, we are not able to see that, but that's all to come. And that Prabhupada explains that by trying to see Krishna everywhere through his energies, as we get purified, the time will come when we will actually see Krishna present before us. That's the wonderful promise of Bhakti Yoga. No other yoga can boast this. So when we're performing our devotional service, we are trying to do that with as much bhakti as possible. We may not see that Krishna is, accepting what we're offering or how much he's reciprocating with us. But actually he does, and he's very near. And like even when Christians pray, how does anyone pray if they don't understand that the Lord is there listening to them? So the form of prayer is an acknowledgement of the Lord being there. And there's some nice examples of where devotees have actually kind of had an experience of Krishna, like directly. There's a very nice story of a little boy who was 5 years old. His name was Raghunandan Thakur, and his father's name was Mukunda Das, and his father was a devotee, and they had Gopinath deity, and his father used to cook every day and offer to the deity. So one day he had to go off on business, so he said to his little son, can you please cook, and can you please offer, with love to Gopinath what you've cooked. And as he left, he said, make sure he eats. So Raghunandan Thakur, at 5 years old, he cooked. I mean, really, I don't know if anybody's seen in India. When you go to India, you see these little kids, they're 5 or 6 year olds, they're rolling chapatis and making them, they're so expert. So he cooked, and he took in the offering and offered it before Gopinath. And then he looked and he saw the plate was not empty. And then so then he became frantic, you've got to eat, please eat. So he was begging the Lord, and the Lord ate, and so he was happy, and he went back, took the plate to the kitchen, and then when his father came home, his father asked him, "Oh, how did you go?" "Yes, everything's good. May I have some Mahaprasad?" "There's no Mahaprasad, the Lord ate." And the father was bewildered, because he's offering every day and the Mahaprasad remains there. So a couple of days later, he asked Raghunandan Das Thakur, "Oh, can you cook again? I have to go. Make sure the Lord eats." And so again, Raghunandan cooked and offered. Now this time the father had taken himself round him and hidden himself where he could see. And he actually saw Gopinath lift a laddu and start to eat this laddu. Gopinath ate half the laddu, and then Gopinath looked and saw Mukunda Das. So that was it, he didn't eat any more. So that deity has half a laddu in his hand now. And so Mukunda Das was offering every day, as we do, we offer every day. And we can see, it's still there at the end of the offering. But we have to understand that the Lord eats with his eyes, he eats with his ears. He doesn't need to get down and eat with his hands. He's multifunctional in every sense of the word. So every morning when we sing about this to the Lord every single day. When we sing Bhajanti Banti Kalyanti Tarana vigrahasya. So the meaning of that is, I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs, and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. So we sing it every day, so we need have no doubt that Krishna is hearing when we're praying to him, that he's hearing as we chant his names, because his name is non-different, that as we're dressing the deities, he is there, he's eating the offerings. And that is his kindness to appear in the deity form, to appear in his holy name, because he wants us back, even though we're so slow and reluctant. But that's what he wants. So, So I was thinking about, that's explaining here that we're covered by our material senses, and devotees try so hard to serve Krishna as nicely as they can, to give everything, but our minds are so tricky, and it's so hard to sort of go from that stage of, yes, Krishna, I want to surrender. And then we realise, I've got so many coverings, so many anarthas. And so I found an encouraging verse which I'd like to share with you. It's from the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 11th canto, and it's quoted in the Chaitanya Shikshamrita book. So, having awakened faith in the narrations of my glories, and I believe the devotees have that faith in the Lord's glories. They feel bliss when they hear the stories of the Lord fighting or whatever he's doing. It's like wonderful. Or his pastimes with the Vrindavan residents. It's very ecstatic to hear that. So being disgusted with all material activities, and generally we get pretty disgusted with the material world, knowing that all sense gratification leads to misery, we know that, whether we've realised it, but still being unable to renounce all sense gratification, my devotee should remain happy and worship me with great faith and conviction. There you go. Even though sometimes he engages in sense gratification, my devotee knows that all sense gratification leads to a miserable result, and he sincerely laments such activities. When an enlightened person engages constantly in worshipping me through loving devotional service, as dictated by me, his heart becomes firmly situated in me. Thus all material desires within the heart are destroyed. The knot in the heart is pierced, all misgivings are cut to pieces, and the chain of fruitive actions is terminated when I am seen as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 10, verses 27 to 30. So it really gives one hope, because we all know, we have this understanding, Krishna, you're everything. Krishna, I want to surrender to you. But there's always a but. But anyway, it's encouraging that we can go on serving Krishna with as much prayer and hope and sincerity as we can, but still there's some sense gratification there that is going to disappear, and that will change. The senses will change, and we will be able to use these senses for Krishna, because our senses, actually, our real senses, are spiritual. So, I feel like there's so many encouraging verses in everywhere through the scriptures. I have this exchange every day with my god sister Rasarani, where we study a verse of the Bhagavatam and then we speak. We call it Bhagavatam Buddies, and we talk about that verse. And we've come across so many beautiful verses. This is in the 3rd canto. And so we keep saying, oh, we're going to have to make an antidepressant verse book. You know, we'll get all the verses, antidepressant she calls it, to help us, you know, because there are so many wonderful, encouraging verses that you can find. So this is actually one of them, really, because it's explaining here at the end of the purport that the devotees of the Lord who are transcendental to the above-mentioned three modes of nature can see the all-blissful transcendental form of the Lord with their vision of love in the attitude of pure devotional service. So that's what we're after, that's what we're striving for, and that's what's going to happen. Of course, it's up to us, you know, how much we put into the process, but it's going to come back, because that's guaranteed. Krishna guarantees it, Lord Chaitanya guarantees it. And really we have such a sort of time of mercy here. You know, when you sort of read the Ramayana and there's stories of Vasishtha and what's his name? Vishvamitra Muni and Vasishtha. And Vishvamitra Muni was a king who went to Vasishtha, who was a great sage, took a great army of 10,000 men or something. And Vasishtha, out of kindness, living in the forest with nothing except a shabala, this cow, this Surabhi cow, he said, well, I'll feed your army. So not only, he fed the army, and every single soldier had everything that he liked on his plate. So one man will have sweet rice, sweets, this, that and the other, pakoras. Another man will have samosas. They all had different things on their plate because Sabala had that. She was a Surabhi cow, a desiratory, so she knew what everybody desired and she presented that. So then Vishwamitra wanted that cow, you know, you should give the best of everything to the king. And Vasishtha's like, are you kidding? Hang on. I need her for everything. I use her for everything, my sacrifices and so in the end there was a whole a leela that went on for thousands and thousands and thousands of years as Vishvamitra tried to get to the mode of goodness. He was just trying to move up from that mode of passion to the mode of goodness so that he could become a sage. And I mean, really, it just goes on and on. There's 14 different chapters in the Ramayana about in the Valmiki Ramayana, how he was trying to, he was trying to elevate himself, he was trying to elevate others. In the end, at one stage, he had to create a second heaven underneath heaven because, there were so many difficult events that went along with his trying to get to the mode of goodness. And finally, after thousands of years of austerities, he got conferred the status of rishi. And then Menaka came along and he fell in love with her and it all went to pieces. So then he took a vow again he was going to do, and he did another 1,000 years of austerities, and with his arms uplifted and living on air alone. And then he would seat himself in 4 fires in the summer and then stand in the winter in the freezing cold. And then the demigods sent along Ramba to attract him, knowing Menaka had attracted him. And then he was so angry because he knew what was going on that he cursed her to become a stone. And he's like, no, I've got anger still. And again, he did so many austerities. I won't breathe for 1,000 years. So it went on and on. And then when he finally finished everything, Indra sent along somebody. He was finally going to eat after thousands of years. Indra sent along someone, a brahmana, who asked him for his food. But by that time he'd conquered anger, he gave the food. So, and then he decided to not breathe for 1,000 yugas, and there was smoke coming out of his head. And Lord Brahma conferred on him, the status of, being a rishi and being in the mode of goodness. So just imagine if we had to do that. We wouldn't get too many candidates. So Srila Prabhupada used to say so many times, what is the difficulty? Chant, dance, take prasadam. So, of course, that chanting needs to be with connection. And actually, the more we do with connection, connecting to Krishna as we chant, connecting to Krishna as we perform our service, connecting to Krishna as we interact with other souls who are connecting with Krishna. So the more connection is there, then the Lord becomes pleased with us, and our progress will accelerate. So, thank you very much. And I wonder if anybody has any questions.
Krishna, thank you for the class. You were saying earlier on that even when we're chanting, our senses are always going out, latching onto, getting attracted to external sense objects, like especially the eyes. So we all experience that we're constantly getting, even as practicing devotees, bewildered or enticed by the senses, especially the eyes. So we know the story of Mangala and how he was bewildered twice by two beautiful women, Chittamani and the other beautiful lady along the road to Vrindavan. And as the story goes, he lost his, he became blind. But that was like in a spiritual sense, that was a great boon for him, because he never became bewildered again. He went straight to Vrindavan and he lived there for hundreds of years and completely devoted his life to Krishna. He became a pure devotee. So could we say that someone who, in the ordinary material sense, someone who's blind or deaf could be considered a great misfortune, but spiritually, like if someone came to Krishna consciousness and they were blind, it could be very, very great boon for them, because there's a lot less chance of getting bewildered by the sense objects.
Well, if someone comes to Krishna consciousness with whatever problem, I remember in Mayapur there was at the next property to our Mayapur Chandra Daya Mandir, there was a deaf man, and he used to chant his rounds, and he didn't chant so well, like from our point of view, but he was chanting the holy name, so he got the benefit. And regarding blind, it's a tragedy, isn't it? You wouldn't be able to see the deities. There's so much you'd miss out on. But if that's your lot, and I believe Bilva Mangal Thakur deliberately did that with his eyes, because he felt the affliction was just too strong for him to conquer. But yes, so whatever afflictions and problems that someone comes along with, or challenges, that person and everybody else can see them as an asset, and if that person is able to use whatever they have in Krishna's service, then it's definitely an asset. But it's not something that we deliberately want to happen. If we can use all these senses, but for Krishna's pleasure, then Krishna is so pleased. And that's like the goal of life, to be able to dovetail everything for Krishna. So that's what we're always praying for. Okay.
Just a small comment. This is quite actually Prabhupada in his 67th lecture. He said everybody wants to see God. And he said just hear and be with Krishna.
Just hear and be with Krishna. Nice. Yeah. Yeah, it's so absorbing if we can actually close off the senses and just, concentrate on the holy name. And we get that chance every single day of our lives. We're so fortunate. And I know because we have an unsteady mind, sometimes it's more difficult than other times. But sometimes, you can actually close off everything and really kind of go deep into the holy name, and then you sort of feel the relish, and it's kind of like a pathway, Well, all that we're doing, it's a pathway. I was thinking when the kirtan was going on this morning, it was so nice. Everyone was ecstatic. Everyone was absorbed in the names of Radha and Krishna. And it's like that song in by Narottam Das Thakur, Golokera Premadhana Harinam Sankirtan. So what the gopis and the inhabitants of Vrindavan are doing in Vrindavan, they're ecstatically worshipping Krishna. But that when Harinam comes, when you're absorbed in the holy name, that's the same, exactly the same as what's going on in Vrindavan. I was just kind of meditating on that this morning when everyone was so ecstatic, and I was thinking, this is actually the spiritual world, this is Goloka. But because we just sort of get covered all the time, we don't have that consciousness. We really don't get the potency and the magnificence and the wonder of what we're doing every single day. So, we've got to be a little bit mindful of what we're doing, because we're just so fortunate and so blessed. Okay, thank you so much. Hare Krishna.